Beneath chandeliers, blazing like constellations, a hush falls over the assembly rooms. A string of heirloom pearls gleams at Serafina Trevelyan's throat, an unspoken promise, a destiny everyone expects. Then the announcement shatters the room. The Marquis will wed her younger sister. Applause thunders, hearts break in silence. What secret turned love into spectacle? What past vow, never spoken, always felt, has returned to demand a price? Between duty and desire, one choice will ignite a scandal that Bath will never forget. Before we begin, tell us where you're listening from, and share what draws you most to period romances, the aching glances, the glittering scandals, or love's hard-won triumph. Bath, England, the year of our Lord, 1851. The season had returned like a promise, whispered in silk-lined corridors, perfumed, glittering, full of impossible hopes. Gas lamps flickered along the royal crescent, their golden glow softening the sharp edges of carriages and the expectation-laced hush that hovered over the stone facades of Somerset Place. Within one of these noble townhouses, the Trevelyan family home pulsed with a quiet frenzy. Tonight was not just a ball, it was meant to be a coronation. Serafina Trevelyan sat still as a statue before her vanity, the soft rustle of her dove-grey silk gown whispering against the polished floor as her maid pinned the final strands of her chestnut hair into place. Each movement was deliberate, her posture perfect, her breath steady. But within her chest, something thudded with the echo of all the years she had waited for this night to come. A single string of pearls rested against the pale slope of her collarbone. They were not new nor ostentatious, but they had been worn by her mother on her wedding day and by her grandmother before her. Their appearance tonight was no accident. It was a declaration, quiet but unmistakable. She was ready to become the Marchioness of Ashcombe, ready to fulfill her family's expectations, ready above all for Edmund. Behind her, Lady Agnes Trevelyan stood in the doorway, her expression a careful blend of scrutiny and pride. The burgundy folds of her gown swayed as she approached, her dark eyes scanning her eldest daughter like an auctioneer assessing a prized heirloom. "You look the part," she murmured, her voice clipped. "Do not forget what is at stake." Serafina did not flinch. She merely nodded once and turned toward the mirror. What she saw there was not the girl who once climbed the trees outside the abbey with muddy hems and wild hair. No, tonight she was elegance, precision, expectation distilled into flesh. Down the corridor, a burst of girlish laughter broke through the hush. Clara, 19 and incandescent, the darling of every drawing room, every tea circle, every eager bachelor in Bath. She appeared in the doorway a moment later, her gown a vision in sky-blue silk, her golden curls bobbing with each breathless step. "Oh, Serafina, you look like a statue carved by angels," Clara gasped, clasping her hands together. "Mama, don't you think so? Doesn't she look like someone meant to be a marquis's bride?" Serafina's smile was faint, but it held. "Let's not speak of what is not yet spoken." Lady Agnes narrowed her eyes, but said nothing. Clara, ever light-hearted, merely giggled and twirled before the mirror, her skirts catching the candlelight like ripples of water. By 8:30, the Trevelyans' carriage rolled through the gates of the assembly rooms, its polished brass lanterns gleaming against the dusk. Inside, Serafina sat between her parents, her gloved hands resting lightly on her lap, her breath measured. Clara leaned out the window, marveling at the lanterns strung above the entrance, her laughter as musical as it was innocent. The ballroom was already abuzz when they arrived. Chandeliers sparkled like a constellation overhead, and the scent of roses and waxed floors mingled in the air. Laughter and violin music twined together as gowns rustled and silk slippers skimmed the polished parquet. Serafina descended the staircase slowly, the weight of the night pressing against her spine. Every step brought her closer to him. Edmund Blackthorne stood at the far end of the room beneath a cascade of golden drapery, his figure unmistakable. Tall, broad-shouldered, his dark frock coat tailored to perfection. A silver watch chain caught the candlelight at his waist. His gaze swept the room like a sentinel's. calculated, alert. When his eyes found hers, the air thickened. He did not smile. But something in his expression flickered, recognition, memory, perhaps the faintest crack in his composure. Lady Helena stood beside him, a towering figure in sapphire velvet and jet jewels, her posture regal, her eyes like polished glass. Serafina had never feared her, but tonight the woman radiated control in its most refined and dangerous form. The Trevelyan's approached. Greetings were exchanged, curtsies offered. Serafina's heart beat too loudly. Lady Helena's voice rang out, clear as a bell. "Shall we proceed with the announcement, my dear Edmund?" Time slowed. Serafina's lungs emptied. She turned her face to him just slightly, her gloved hand poised to accept his. The music lowered. The room grew hushed. Even the dancers stilled. Edmund stepped forward. "As many of you have long expected," he began, his voice measured and smooth, "I wish to share a most joyous revelation, one that honors tradition, unity, and the affection between two families of long-standing esteem." Serafina's hand trembled, barely perceptible. He did not turn toward her. "I am honored," he said, "to announce my engagement to Miss Clara Trevelyan." Gasps. One dropped glass. A long, breathless silence. Serafina did not move. Her chin remained high, her smile did not falter, but her body became stone, cold, still, a sculpture of composure carved in disbelief. Around her, the ballroom tilted, colors blurred. Applause rippled, but distantly, like an echo through water. Clara, frozen for a beat, then flushed a brilliant pink. She blinked, then beamed, her hand fluttering to her chest as she was ushered forward by Lady Agnes, whose face was pale but radiant. Serafina stood alone. The string of pearls at her throat, so carefully chosen, now felt like a noose. Edmund did not look at her, not once. Not even when the music resumed, and he led Clara to the center of the floor, where they began the first waltz of the evening. The crowd watched with sighs and clinking glasses. Lady Helena's eyes found Serafina's across the ballroom, and she smiled. But Serafina did not cry. Not yet. She simply turned, her steps slow and graceful, and walked toward the far edge of the ballroom, where the shadows waited and where no one could see how tightly her fists were clenched beneath her gloves. And as the music swelled once more, she let the silence within her grow. For something inside Serafina Trevelyan had fractured, and though no one noticed the crack that night, it would soon become impossible to ignore. The morning air in Bath carried a chill that bit through wool and lace, yet the sky was soft with pale grey light, as if the heavens themselves had the courtesy not to shine too brightly after such a night. Along the curve of the royal crescent, the cobblestones still glistened faintly from the night's dew, and the hush that fell over the grand houses seemed to echo Serafina Trevelyan's silence. She walked alone. Her dove-grey walking dress swayed gently with each step, the hem brushing against damp stone. A matching bonnet framed her face, hiding most of her expression from the few early risers who passed by with widened eyes and two polite nods. Servants on errands slowed their pace when they saw her. Gentlemen tipped their hats, but their eyes flickered with something more than courtesy, pity perhaps, or speculation. A governess tightened her grip on a child's hand and turned the other way. A carriage creaked to a stop, just long enough for a gloved hand to pull back a curtain and observe her as one might observe a fallen statue, once grand, now cracked. Serafina noticed none of it, or rather, she noticed everything and responded to nothing. The pearl necklace was gone. Instead, a modest brooch pinned her collar closed, a pale cameo of a sleeping woman. Her gloved hands were tucked neatly at her waist, though her fingers tightened now and then, as if fighting the impulse to tear something, fabric, memory, perhaps her own skin. Her steps echoed beneath the great sweep of Georgian stone that framed the crescent, each footfall a sound too loud in a city that thrived on quiet judgment. Serafina had grown up here, amid its grandeur and its gaze. She had walked this same path many times as a child, as a young lady, as the dutiful daughter of a family once considered secure. But today, she was not that girl. And the crescent, once a place of comfort, now loomed over her like a tribunal. She paused at the railing that overlooked the green. Her eyes drifted beyond the ironwork, beyond the symmetry of hedges and paths, to the hills rolling into mist. Her breath rose in delicate plumes, dissolving into the air like the life she had imagined. Behind her, the sound of footsteps made her spine stiffen. She did not turn. "Miss Trevelyan," came a man's voice, soft, uncertain. A merchant's son, perhaps. Someone from last season who had once asked her to dance and been politely declined. She did not respond. After a few more awkward seconds, his steps retreated, and she was alone again. The silence wrapped itself around her shoulders like a second shawl. When Serafina finally returned to the townhouse on Somerset Place, the entryway was awash in pale gold light. A maid rushed to take her gloves, her eyes darting nervously to the drawing room, where voices rose and fell in clipped tones. The scent of strong tea and lavender-scented linen clung to the air, too clean, too composed. Lady Agnes stood at the center of the room, still in her morning attire, the lace at her collar sharp as thorns. Her expression was unreadable, save for the faint twitch of her mouth when Serafina entered. "There you are," she said with cold relief. "You were seen at the Crescent, alone." "I needed air," Serafina replied softly, removing her bonnet. Her hair, still pinned from the previous night, held the memory of the pearls that had once rested there. Lady Agnes approached, her steps swift, precise. "Then breathe in the privacy of our garden. You are not some common girl to parade her disgrace before the city." Serafina did not flinch. "I am not the one who paraded it, Mama." That earned her a sharp inhale from her mother, who raised a hand as if to speak, then let it drop. "Control yourself," she said finally. "Dignity is all we have left." At that moment, the door opened behind them. Clara entered, still wearing the soft silk robe she had chosen the night before. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes wide with guilt and confusion. The diamond ring glittered faintly on her finger. "Serafina," she began. Lady Agnes turned. "Not now." But Serafina raised her hand. "Let her speak." Clara stepped forward hesitantly. I didn't know. I swear it. I never imagined he would say my name. I thought—" Her voice broke. "It should have been you." Serafina studied her sister. So beautiful, so bright, so heartbreakingly young. "It was never spoken aloud," Serafina said, her voice like glass, thin and sharp. "There was no promise, no claim, only understanding, and perhaps that was my mistake." Clara's lower lip trembled. "Can you forgive me?" That question Serafina could not answer. She turned away, her eyes burning, not with rage, but with something far more dangerous, the ache of mourning something that had never fully belonged to her. Upstairs, Sir Henry had locked himself in his study. The scent of brandy clung to the corridor, and no one dared disturb him. By midday, the drawing room filled with visitors. Letters arriving, cards left at the door, inquiries made. Lady Agnes fended off each one with polished grace. Clara remained cloistered in her chamber. Serafina, unable to endure the walls closing in, escaped to the garden. The roses had been trimmed back for winter, only the hard stalks remained, reaching upward like hands frozen mid-prayer. She wandered among them, her shawl drawn tight over her shoulders, her thoughts unraveling like threads from a seam, long strained. She didn't hear the footsteps until they were close. "Miss Trevelyan." The voice made her freeze. Deep, deliberate, unmistakable. She turned. Edmund stood at the edge of the gravel path, his black frock coat buttoned high, his gloved hands folded in front of him. He had no right to look as calm as he did. No right to stand in this garden, her sanctuary, and disturb what little ground she still held. "I've come to call on Clara," he said simply. But his eyes were not searching for Clara. They were searching her. Serafina straightened. "She is not receiving visitors. I was told otherwise." She tilted her head, her gaze narrowing slightly. "Then you were misinformed." A silence passed between them, thick, charged, not of words, but of all that had been left unsaid. The air itself seemed to shift. The wind, which moments ago had been gentle, now danced through the bare branches with a restless murmur. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "No," she replied. "You owe me nothing. You made your choice, in front of everyone." His jaw flexed. "It was not my intention." She cut him off with a glance. "Do not insult me further by pretending it was an accident." His mouth opened, then closed. The silence returned. Only this time, it throbbed. Serafina turned from him and began walking toward the stone bench near the yew trees. He followed, but kept a respectful distance. His presence was a weight, unsettling, pulling at something within her she did not wish to examine. "I did not know Lady Helena would speak before I had the chance," he said quietly. "The moment was stolen." Serafina sat. "No one stole anything from you, my lord. You stood there, you said the words, and the world believed them." A gust of wind lifted a lock of her hair from her cheek. She did not brush it away. He approached, stopping only when he was close enough to see the pain in her eyes and the strength beneath it. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said. "But you did," she replied. "And what you wanted no longer matters." Their eyes met, and for a moment, only a moment, the garden seemed to hold its breath. He bowed. "Then I shall leave." She nodded once. Her hands remained folded on her lap, her eyes fixed on the frost-bitten earth. As he turned and walked away, Serafina did not look back, but the wind, once again, carried with it the faintest whisper of regret, of something lost too soon, and of something else entirely, the dangerous stirrings of what remained. The Bath Assembly rooms, with their high ceilings and glittering chandeliers, glowed like a temple to society's most sacred idol, appearance. Candlelight shimmered along the gilt-framed mirrors, multiplying beauty and illusion in equal measure. The floor beneath the dancers was polished to a mirror-like sheen, and the air was thick with perfume, violins, and the polished charm of practiced smiles. It was Thursday evening, the most anticipated gathering of the season thus far, and the room pulsed with expectation. Whispered greetings, measured laughter, the clinking of glass and the rustle of silks created a symphony of ritual. Every eye was watching, every breath held meaning, and all eyes at some point found their way to one couple, Clara Trevelyan, newly promised to the Marquis of Ashcombe, and the Marquis himself. Clara's pale blue gown shimmered with embroidered silver thread. She floated across the floor like a porcelain figurine, light, delicate, glowing. Her golden curls had been pinned half up with sprays of tiny white flowers, a touch so innocent it bordered on theatrical. At her side, Edmund moved with practiced elegance, his hand firm at the small of her back, his gaze attentive. To the watching world, they were perfection. Lady Helena Blackthorne sat perched like a queen upon a velvet-backed chair near the orchestra, her eyes never leaving them. Her sapphire gown, layered in velvet and adorned with jet beading, swallowed the light and gave nothing back. Her gloved fingers curled tightly around a closed fan, but her expression was calm, composed, almost regal in its approval. But elsewhere in the room, not all was silent admiration. By the refreshment table, Mrs. Godwin fluttered her ostrich feather fan with exaggerated grace, her gown an unfortunate shade of coral that clashed with the faded roses in her bonnet. Her voice, sweetened with mock sympathy, dripped through the air like syrup gone sour. "Well, I heard that she was meant to be the bride," she whispered to a thin-lipped widow beside her. "The elder one. What was her name? Serafina?" "Yes, but something must have happened. A quiet scandal, perhaps? One never knows with these proud girls." The widow gave a non-committal hum, sipping her lemonade while watching Serafina from across the room. Serafina Trevelyan stood near a cluster of palms, her hands resting lightly against the pale satin of her skirts. Her gown tonight was the color of pressed violets, elegant but understated, its bodice cut modestly and edged with fine lace. A silver comb held back her chestnut hair, and her only jewelry was a single amethyst pendant at her throat. She was neither concealed nor on display, present yet somehow apart. Her posture was flawless, her expression composed. But her eyes betrayed her. Julian Fairfax had been watching them for some time. Tall, with light brown curls and the kind of open, thoughtful face that invited conversation, Julian moved through society with the ease of someone who observed more than he said. Tonight, he wore a finely cut black coat with a waistcoat of forest green brocade, the fabric catching light every time he turned. He approached her slowly, his steps confident, but not presumptuous. "Miss Trevelyan," he said gently, "you appear to be enduring this evening rather than enjoying it." She turned to him with a measured smile. "Then I am not as unreadable as I hoped." "Hardly," he said with quiet amusement, "though I imagine most in this room are far too self-involved to notice the difference." She raised an eyebrow. "Including you?" "Especially me," he replied. "But I'm attempting to reform." That earned him the softest laugh, a sound like glass chimes in distant wind. "May I claim the next waltz?" he asked, extending his hand. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I would like that." When they joined the dancers on the floor, they were an arresting pair, graceful, poised, distinct in their restraint. Julian guided her gently, never too close, never too formal. His touch was respectful, his gaze steady. "You look well," he said as they moved. "I am not," she replied without bitterness. He glanced at her. "Then you wear your pain beautifully. Is that a compliment?" "It is a sorrow." She said nothing, but her lips parted slightly, her breath catching as they passed too near Clara and Edmund. Julian noticed the tremor in her frame. Across the room, Edmund's hand faltered slightly on Clara's waist. His eyes followed Serafina as she spun gently in Julian's arms, her skirts catching the light, her lashes lowered. Lady Helena leaned slightly forward, her gaze sharpening. Clara, sensing the shift, looked up at her fiancé and followed his line of sight. Her smile wavered. Her fingers clenched tighter around his. After the dance, Julian guided Serafina back to her place by the palms. He bowed low. "Thank you for granting me the privilege." "You were very kind," she murmured. "It is more than I deserved." "No, Serafina," he said softly, using her name as if he had earned the right through gentleness. "You deserve far more than what this room has offered you." Her eyes lifted to his, startled. Something unspoken passed between them. Complicity, perhaps. Understanding. But just then, a loud laugh rang out across the floor. Clara's laugh. It was bright, high-pitched, and just a touch too forced. Lady Agnes stood by the French doors, watching everything with the thin-lipped intensity of a woman who saw all but said nothing. She offered Serafina a slight nod, the kind that carried 100 years of expectation and 1,000 rules of silence. Later, near the tea service, Clara clutched her fan with trembling fingers. Her voice was low as she whispered to her mother, "He didn't look at me once during that dance, Mama. Not once." Lady Agnes pursed her lips. "Do not be foolish, Clara. He is yours now. What happened before no longer matters." "But it does," Clara whispered, her throat tightening. "I feel it in every glance." And elsewhere in the room, Serafina stood near a marble column, half-shadowed, half-seen. Her eyes met Edmund's across the space. And in that single moment, no touch, no words, no smile, the weight of everything unsaid between them pressed into the hollow space between their ribs. A glance, a breath, a memory. Then the music rose again, and the moment was gone. But the echo of it lingered, delicate, powerful, and far too dangerous to name. The spring rain came suddenly that week, as if the skies had grown weary of pretending to be bright. Bath's cobbled streets, once bustling with society's carefully measured steps, now glistened with the weight of heavy clouds and dripping eaves. The River Avon ran darker, faster, and the lamplight flickering through windows cast distorted shadows onto the wet stones below. Within the Trevelyan household, however, the real storm brewed quietly, inside parlours lined with damask and expectations. Clara, radiant fiancée to the Marquis of Ashcombe, had begun to wither beneath the delicate crown she had been given. What had once thrilled her now weighed on her shoulders like the velvet of her formal gowns. Invitations piled upon her writing desk, every envelope sealed with wax and suffused with obligation. She answered them with trembling hands, afraid of committing a faux pas, of misspelling a name, of seeming unworthy. It was to Serafina she turned for guidance. In the golden light of the morning parlor, Clara sat cross-legged on the fainting couch, her pale blue morning robe crumpled like forgotten silk. What if Lady Greenock expects me to call on her before the dinner, and what if she doesn't? Mama says one thing, Lady Helena says another, and Edmund only tells me not to worry. Seraphina, seated beside the small escritoire, folded her letter with deliberate care. Her sage-green daydress fell in clean, severe lines, unadorned save for a narrow belt of velvet ribbon. "Then do what you think is right, Clara," she said, her voice calm, low. "The world will always find fault. Let them," Clara sighed. "But you would know. You always know." The words stung more than they should have. Seraphina looked at her sister, at the flushed cheeks and anxious eyes. How could she despise what was never meant to hurt her? She stood. "Come, let's take a drive. The air may help you breathe more easily." Outside, the rain had eased into a steady curtain. Grey and silver streaked the windows of the carriage, muffling the sound of hooves and wheels. Clara leaned her head against the pane, silent now, her energy spent. The drive had soothed her, or perhaps only numbed her enough to rest. And then they stopped. The coach shuddered beneath them as the driver called out from above. "A fallen branch, miss. I'll need a few minutes." Seraphina turned from the opposite window, adjusting the lapel of her cloak. Before she could speak, the door opened, and Edmund stepped inside. He was drenched from the shoulders down, his hair darkened by the rain, a sheen of water clinging to his coat. His gloves were off, his expression unreadable. He paused for the briefest second when he saw Seraphina, and then glanced at the sleeping Clara. "I saw your carriage halted," he said, keeping his voice low. "I came to assist, but it seems I've only intruded." "You are always welcome," Seraphina answered coolly, though her hands clutched her reticule a bit too tightly. He closed the door behind him. The interior grew dim, the light outside waning. The rain played its constant rhythm on the roof. They sat in silence. Clara slept on, oblivious. Seraphina looked straight ahead, but she felt the weight of him beside her, not too close, not too far, just enough to tilt the world inside the coach. Finally, she spoke. "It's difficult, isn't it, wearing a crown forged by other people's dreams?" His gaze shifted toward her. "She's trying." "I know." A pause. "So am I." He swallowed, then turned slightly toward her. "And do you find you're succeeding?" She smiled, bitter and elegant. "That depends on the audience." Outside, the driver's voice shouted something about a branch. Inside, no one moved. Edmund leaned back, the shadows emphasizing the sharp planes of his cheekbones. "I never meant to hurt you." Seraphina's breath caught. Her hands lay still in her lap. "You had a choice," she said, barely above a whisper. "You always did." His voice was low, "and I chose wrong." The words filled the space between them like a flare in the dark. There was no apology, no excuse, only truth. Seraphina turned to him, eyes glistening not with tears, but fury. "Why say it now?" "Because it's the only thing I have left to say that still belongs to me." Her throat ached with the ache of unspoken things. Her body remained still, composed, but inside, her soul twisted. "I don't want your guilt," she said. "I want—" She stopped. He leaned forward, just enough for the light from the small coach lamp to touch his face. His eyes searched hers. "What do you want?" he asked. She could not say it. Not here. Not now. Not when her sister slept a breath away. Not when every fiber of propriety screamed that nothing in this moment should exist. Instead, she looked down, and then away. "It doesn't matter." "It does," he replied, "even if it changes nothing." Seraphina turned her face toward the window. The rain streaked the glass in rivulets, like tears that could not fall from her own eyes. "I wanted to be chosen," she said finally. "Not for duty, not for name, not for convenience. Just chosen." He closed his eyes. "And I was a coward." Silence pressed between them once more. Only this time, it was not empty. It pulsed. It breathed. It carried with it the echo of everything they had been denied. Clara stirred in her sleep, murmuring something too soft to understand. Seraphina straightened her shoulders. The moment dissolved. The coach jolted as the wheels rolled forward again. The road was clear. Edmund opened the door. The rain had lessened, but his coat was still damp. He stepped out, then turned. He did not say goodbye, only met Serafina's eyes and held them for one final, fleeting heartbeat. And then he was gone. Inside the carriage, Serafina exhaled slowly. She reached for the edge of her shawl and pulled it tighter. Outside, the sky wept quietly, and within her, the ache of the forbidden bloomed in silence, petal by petal, breath by breath. The rain had ceased, but the weight of it lingered in the air, draping Bath in a heaviness that clung to the walls, the windows, the very breath of the city. In the Trevelyan household, the atmosphere had turned brittle, like porcelain poised to crack beneath the pressure of too many hands, gripping it too tightly. Lady Helena Blackthorne arrived without an invitation. She stepped through the doorway of the Trevelyan drawing-room with the composure of a monarch entering conquered territory. Her sapphire gown was pressed to perfection, her bonnet adorned with two sharp feathers that seemed to mirror the arch of her unforgiving brows. A footman trailed behind her with a leather satchel. She insisted remain by her side at all times. Lady Agnes received her with practiced civility, her mouth pulled into the kind of smile that hid both contempt and fear. Serafina stood by the mantel, silent, her hands clasped so tightly they turned pale. Clara, for once, remained upstairs, claiming a headache. "I'll be direct," Lady Helena began, removing her gloves with the precision of a surgeon. "The engagement must be solidified publicly. The whispers must cease." Lady Agnes nodded, wary. "We agree. A formal announcement is being arranged." Helena leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "Not merely arranged, enforced. I have no tolerance for scandal, and your eldest daughter's presence continues to fuel speculation. That is inconvenient." Lady Agnes's jaw tensed. Serafina did not blink. Helena opened her satchel and removed a thin folder of parchment. She placed it on the tea table with a single finger. "This," she said, "is an agreement drafted last autumn, concerning an investment from my late husband into Sir Henry's overseas shipping endeavour. It has yet to be finalized. Should this engagement fall into disrepute, I will have no choice but to withdraw." Lady Agnes turned pale. "That investment is the backbone of—" "I am aware," Helena cut in smoothly, "which is why I am here. This union is not merely personal, it is contractual." She looked directly at Serafina. "And you, Miss Trevelyan, would do well to remember that the past is not always an asset. Sometimes it is a liability." Without waiting for a response, she stood, nodded once, and swept out of the room, leaving the scent of violets and iron in her wake. That night, the house remained silent through dinner. Clara did not appear. Sir Henry poured himself a second glass of port and disappeared into his study without a word. The fire in the hearth crackled, but its warmth did not reach the corners of the room. After the plates were cleared, Lady Agnes approached Serafina in the corridor. "You must go to London," she said quietly. "Lady Margrave has extended an invitation. Accept it." Serafina turned toward her mother, studying her face. "To silence Bath, or to protect Clara's illusion?" Lady Agnes's lips tightened. "To protect us all. Your presence here complicates everything." "And what of my feelings, mother? Are they so inconvenient that I must be shipped away like damaged goods?" Lady Agnes exhaled slowly. "You're not being punished, Serafina. You are being preserved. In London you may recover your dignity. Here, you are only a shadow." The words stung, but they were not untrue. The next morning, Serafina walked alone in the garden. The sky was pale, overcast, the grass still damp beneath her boots. Spring flowers had begun to bloom timidly, uncertain whether to trust the weather. Julian Fairfax found her near the rose arbor. He wore no hat, his hair tousled by the breeze. In his hand was a small bouquet of violets, wild, imperfect, genuine. "I thought you might be here," he said gently. She turned, her eyes softening at the sight of him. "You always know." "I listen," he said with a shrug. "That's all." They walked together, slowly, side by side. The silence between them was comfortable, like the space between two pages waiting to be written on. When they reached the bench near the yew trees, He paused. "You're leaving?" She nodded. "My mother believes it's best. Do you?" "I don't know what I believe anymore." Julian sat, then looked up at her. "Then let me offer something to believe in." She blinked. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small box, not ornate, not gilded, but simple, of polished walnut. "I won't speak of passion," he said, his voice tender. "You have enough of that in your life. I offer you peace, steadiness, respect. We could build a life not out of fire, but out of calm." Serafina's breath caught. "I know I am not the one your heart aches for," he continued, "but perhaps in time I could be the one who helps it heal." Her hands trembled as she reached for the box. She opened it. Inside was a ring with a modest sapphire, flanked by 2 tiny pearls. She stared at it for a long moment, then she closed the lid. "I'm honored," she whispered, "truly. And you are everything I admire. But—" He nodded before she could finish. "You still love him?" Her eyes filled with unshed tears. "Yes, against my will, against my judgment, but yes." Julian stood, gently took her hand and kissed the back of it. "Then I will wait for you to stop." She tried to smile, but it came out broken. "You may be waiting forever. Then I shall wait well." That evening the Trevelyan's attended yet another ball. It was hosted by the Montforts, and every chandelier in the house had been lit. Gowns sparkled, laughter filled the air, and music swirled around them all like a spell cast to keep truths at bay. Serafina wore a gown of pale grey silk, her hair pinned high, her gloves spotless. She stood near the staircase, speaking little, smiling less. Across the ballroom, Edmund entered with Clara on his arm. They were received with applause, smiles, whispers of admiration. Clara glowed under the attention, but Edmund's gaze drifted. He scanned the room once, twice, until it landed on her, Serafina. Their eyes met. For a single moment, the room faded. The chandeliers dimmed, the music dulled. The air between them stretched thin, taut with everything they could never say aloud. Neither of them moved. He did not smile. She did not nod. But something ancient and unspoken passed between them, a grief wrapped in longing, a love bruised by duty. And then someone called his name. Clara tugged his hand. He looked away. The spell broke. But Serafina remained still, not with despair, but with the quiet acceptance of a woman who understood the depth of what could never be, and the strength it took to stand in its shadow. And across the room, hidden behind a wall of painted fans and sparkling jewels, Lady Helena watched it all, and did not blink. The moon hung low over Bath, casting a gauzy silver veil across the rooftops and garden hedges. It was one of those fragile nights when the city seemed suspended in breathless stillness, as if aware that something delicate and irreversible was about to unfold. The wind whispered through the branches of the Trevelyan estate, brushing against the windows like a timid guest asking to be let in. Inside, laughter echoed faintly from the drawing room, but the conservatory was quiet. Quiet enough to feel the tension thickening with every heartbeat. Serafina stood near the tall glass doors, her gloved hands resting gently on the windowsill as she gazed out at the moonlit garden. The air within the conservatory was damp and fragrant with jasmine. The petals, softened by the warmth of the room, perfumed the silence like a secret waiting to be confessed. Behind her, Edmund's voice broke the stillness. "I shouldn't have come tonight." She didn't turn. "And yet here you are." His steps drew closer, each one weighted with hesitation. "It's becoming more difficult to pretend." Her hands tightened slightly. "You seem to do it very well." "That's not fair," he said quietly. "No," she agreed, turning to face him, her eyes shadowed by something far deeper than anger. "None of this is fair." The lantern hanging above cast a soft golden light over their faces. Edmund looked at her with a hunger tempered by restraint, the kind of longing that aches louder in silence than in words. "I came to speak with you," he said, before the others arrived. She drew herself up with quiet dignity. "You risk much by being seen alone with me." He shook his head. "What I risk is not speaking what weighs on my soul." Her eyes searched his, but they held more sorrow than hope. "You speak now. but the moment to act passed long ago. A beat of silence. Then he asked, "Do you believe I feel nothing? That I've been untouched by this torment?" "No," she said, her voice raw. "I believe you feel everything and did nothing." He moved closer. "Because I was bound by duty, by expectation, by a mother who sees the world through ledgers and titles." "And what am I?" she asked, her voice trembling. "A footnote beneath a name? An afterthought in a family alliance?" "You are the only truth I have ever known," he whispered. She turned her face away, the words too cruel in their timing, and that was when they heard it. A soft, startled gasp from behind the ferns near the doorway, a rustle of fabric, a muffled sob. Clara. Serafina froze. Clara stood there, barely visible in the half-light, her hands pressed against her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief and heartbreak. She had come looking for Edmund, perhaps, or simply wandered in from the music, but what she had found unraveled her like a ribbon pulled too tightly. She looked from Edmund to Serafina, and the betrayal carved itself into her features with a quiet brutality. "Did he ever love me?" she whispered. Serafina's heart broke in that instant, not for herself, but for the sister who stood before her, undone. She stepped forward. "Clara!" But Clara stepped back. "Did he ever love me?" The silence was answer enough. Clara's shoulders shook. "I was nothing but a distraction, wasn't I? A safer choice, a convenient lie." Edmund tried to speak, but Clara held up a trembling hand. "No, don't say anything. Not now. Not when everything I feared has turned out to be true." Her eyes found Serafina again. "And you let me believe I mattered. I tried to protect you," Serafina said, her voice shattering. "I tried to protect us both." Clara's expression twisted with anguish. "You should have tried to stop him." Lady Agnes arrived moments later, summoned by the tension she had felt growing across the house. She took one look at her daughters and the man between them, and her face hardened into something cold and sharp. "Leave us," she commanded Edmund, her tone like ice. He hesitated. "Now." He cast a last glance at Serafina, pleading, wounded, but she did not move. She could not. His departure echoed down the corridor like the closing of a heavy door. Lady Agnes turned on Serafina the moment they were alone. "How dare you? Mama, how dare you stand beneath my roof and undo everything we have worked for? Do you think love gives you the right to destroy this family?" Serafina steadied herself. "You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You have put your sister's future and this family's stability at risk for the sake of a fantasy. That ends now." Lady Agnes's voice dropped, low and lethal. "You will leave for London tomorrow. I don't care if you go in tears or triumph, but you will go." Serafina's voice was quiet. "Running will not change the truth." "No," Lady Agnes replied, "but it may silence it." And with that, she swept from the room. That night, Serafina packed slowly, her hands moving with mechanical grace. The pale blue silk of her evening gown was folded away, the scent of lavender still clinging to the fabric. Books, letters, gloves, all tucked into a single trunk. Her heart, however, refused to be packed so neatly. A knock at the door. She turned, expecting a maid. It was Edmund. He stepped inside before she could stop him. His expression was haunted. "I heard you were leaving." She nodded once, not trusting her voice. "I can't let you go like this," he said. "You don't have a choice." "Yes, I do." He approached carefully, as though afraid she might vanish. "I choose you. I will face the consequences. I will explain everything. I'll end this." "No," she interrupted, shaking her head. "It's too late." "It isn't," he insisted. "We can still—" "You should have chosen me," she said, her voice rising, breaking, aching. "Not here. Not in secret. Not in shame. You should have chosen me before the crowd. When it mattered." His mouth opened, but he had no answer. She stepped closer, eyes wet but blazing. "You let them believe I was nothing. You let me fade." "I was afraid," he said, breathless. "And now," she whispered, "so am I." She walked past him, to the doorway. "Goodbye, Edmund." He turned, stunned. "Please." She didn't look back, and when the door closed between them, It was not the sound of wood meeting wood. It was the sound of something sacred breaking, and neither of them would ever forget how it sounded. London was louder than Bath, yet lonelier. The carriages clattered endlessly across the wide streets, bells rang from distant chapels, and the Thames moved with a steady, indifferent current. But within the townhouse on Wimpole Street, where Seraphina now resided, the silence was of another kind, polished, intentional, and cloaked in velvet propriety. It had been 3 weeks since she left Somerset Place behind. She now shared rooms with her widowed cousin, Eugenia Ashcroft, a woman whose solitude was lined with lace and lavender. Eugenia spoke rarely and smiled even less. She wore shades of violet and grey, kept her windows shut against the city soot, and believed deeply in the restorative power of quiet reflection and strong tea. Seraphina had come willingly, though not without sorrow. Here she was neither the rejected sister nor the woman who had nearly unravelled a noble engagement. Here she was simply Miss Trevelyan, unmarried, unobtrusive, and neatly folded into the fabric of genteel society like a pressed handkerchief. Mornings were spent by the fire with a book in hand. Afternoons were for walks in the garden or quiet embroidery. Evenings brought an occasional call or carriage ride through Regent's Park, always under the soft supervision of Eugenia, who viewed all emotion with suspicion and anything romantic with open disdain. Letters came from Bath, measured, neutral, carefully filtered through the hands of Lady Agnes. Clara, they said, was unwell, a cold, perhaps, or nerves. Her wedding had been postponed for reasons undisclosed. She remained indoors, spoke little, and requested no visits. Lady Agnes assured Seraphina that all was proceeding as expected, but the tone was too polished to be sincere. Julian Fairfax wrote twice. His first letter had been hopeful, tender words penned in emerald ink, expressing understanding without pressure, warmth without demand. Seraphina had held it in her lap for a long time before placing it, unopened, inside the drawer of her writing desk. The second letter was shorter, a quiet inquiry, a wish for her health and contentment. This one, she read, but she did not answer. One evening, after a long walk beneath the greyish skies of London, Seraphina returned home to find the drawing room already occupied. The fire crackled softly in the hearth. The scent of rain clung to the windows, and Edmund Blackthorne stood at the centre of the rug, his back turned toward her, as if unsure whether to face the past he had come to find. For a moment, Seraphina stood motionless in the doorway. The air seemed thinner, the walls closer. Her breath slowed. He turned. She had never seen him like this, not in Bath, not at any ball or garden. His hair was slightly unkempt, his cravat loosened, his greatcoat still damp at the edges. He looked neither powerful nor composed. He looked undone. "Your cousin let me in," he said. I hope I haven't overstepped." Seraphina stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Eugenia never stops a man from ruining himself. She considers it a form of natural selection. He almost smiled. Almost. A silence stretched between them. "I wasn't certain you'd see me," he said at last, "and yet you came. I had to." She moved toward the fire, her gloved fingers brushing the edge of the marble mantel. The warmth was gentle, almost unnoticed. "I ended the engagement," he said, his voice calm but hoarse. "There will be no wedding." Her eyes did not rise. "You should tell Clara that, not me. She knows she deserved the truth, no matter how late it came." Seraphina turned slowly to face him. "And what is it you want from me, Edmund?" He took a step forward. "Nothing, I swear it, not pardon, not hope, only to speak what I could not before." She waited. "I chose wrong," he said. "Not because Clara was unworthy, she is kind and good, and I hurt her in ways I will carry forever, but because I let fear decide for me, fear of expectation, of scandal, of my mother, of myself." He swallowed hard. "But I never feared you, not once. Even when you looked at me like you could see through everything I pretended to be." She stared at him, unmoved. "Then why didn't you choose me?" "Because courage," he said, "is a lesson I only learned after it was too late." The room quieted. The fire crackled. Somewhere outside, a carriage passed on wet wheels. "You speak of love," she said, as if regret were enough to crown it. "But love without courage is still cowardice." His face twisted slightly, as if the words struck where none had before. She stepped forward, slow and composed. "Do you think that by coming here, soaked in rain and sorrow, you make yourself worthy, that your confession grants you absolution? No, Edmund, you must understand, this is not about forgiveness." "I don't ask to be forgiven," he said quietly but firmly. "I ask to be heard." "And you have been," she replied. "But I will not carry your redemption for you. That burden belongs to you alone." He nodded, slowly, the weight of her words sinking into him like stones into deep water. Serafina's gaze did not soften. It held steady, not with anger, but with the devastating clarity of a woman who had survived the breaking of something once sacred. "I loved you," she said. "I loved you without pride, without armor, without a plan for survival. And you left me to burn alone in a ballroom full of silken eyes." His breath caught, and he said nothing. "And now," she continued, her voice softer, "I have gathered my ashes, and I have learned how to breathe again. Do not ask me to go back to the fire." Edmund closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were damp, not with weakness, but with the unspeakable ache of truth. He bowed his head, not in defeat but in reverence. "Then I shall go," he said, "and carry the sound of your voice with me for the rest of my life." She did not answer. He turned to the door. His hand rested on the knob. "Serafina," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "thank you for still being more than I deserved." And then he left. The door closed gently. Serafina stood alone in the quiet room, the fire still flickering behind her. She did not cry. She did not collapse. She walked to the window and placed her hand on the cold pane. Outside, the rain had returned, soft, persistent, like the memory of a touch that could never be reclaimed. And in that moment, beneath the flickering light of a dying fire and a sky filled with grey, Serafina Trevelyan let go of what might have been, and reclaimed with silent dignity all that she had become. Bath, once the city of elegance and well-practiced civility, had turned savage beneath the weight of scandal. Behind lace curtains and within marble-pillared drawing rooms, mouths moved quickly, fans fluttered faster, and reputations, like gowns, were shredded in whispers. The broken engagement of the Marquis of Ashcombe was no longer a private wound. It was public spectacle. Lady Helena Blackthorne, swift and strategic, wasted no time casting blame. Her version of events, delivered with the frigid precision of a sharpened blade, named the Trevelyan family as the root of the dishonor. She spoke of manipulation, of ambition dressed in innocence, of a house that had entangled her son with clever designs and dangerous daughters. It was not the truth. But it was a version people found delicious. The consequences arrived swiftly. A wealthy investor from Bristol, set to finalize a significant shipping venture with the Blackthorne estate, withdrew. Quietly, decisively. The language in his letter was diplomatic, but the message was clear. He would not be associated with entanglements that endangered the name of a Marquis. Lady Helena's fury was quiet but relentless. She wrote letters. She gave interviews disguised as conversations. She attended every ball she could and said very little, letting her silence imply volumes. And within the Trevelyan household, all of it was felt like a slow collapse beneath plaster walls. Clara faded. She stopped attending luncheons. She no longer answered letters or played the pianoforte. Her appetite dwindled. Her laughter vanished. The girl who once twirled in new gowns and marveled at her reflection was now a shadow beneath heavy quilts, her eyes ringed with exhaustion, her hands trembling at the slightest sound. Lady Agnes, always composed, began to unravel behind closed doors. Her authority wavered. Her voice, once sharp as steel, grew desperate. And when the physician declared Clara's condition to be the result of emotional strain, Lady Agnes did the only thing her pride had resisted until then. She sent for Serafina. The letter arrived in London, marked with her mother's seal and a single line of ink. "She needs you. Come home." Serafina did not hesitate. The carriage ride back to Bath was cold and quiet. The sky above the hills was colourless, the fields dusted with frost. As they neared the edge of the city, familiar sights emerged like old friends seen through fog. The spire of the abbey, the outline of the crescent, the lanterns flickering near the assembly rooms. But Somerset Place was no longer the house she remembered. The windows were shuttered, the garden unkempt, the light within the foyer was dim, and the air inside carried the scent of lavender and something else: regret. Lady Agnes met her in the corridor. She looked older, her face was drawn, her voice brittle. "She hasn't spoken much. She won't eat. She doesn't ask for anything, only you." Seraphina said nothing. She removed her gloves and climbed the stairs. Clara's chamber was quiet but not still. The fire burned low. The curtains had been drawn, and the scent of roses lingered faintly in the air. Clara lay upon the bed, her figure small beneath layers of coverlets, her face turned toward the window. When Seraphina entered, her sister turned her head slowly. Their eyes met, and in that moment, words became useless. Seraphina crossed the room and sat beside her. She took Clara's hand, thin, cold, trembling, and held it gently between her own. "You came," Clara whispered. "Of course I did." For several minutes neither of them spoke. The fire crackled. A branch tapped gently against the pane. "I thought if I stayed in bed long enough," Clara said softly, "I might disappear." "You don't get to disappear," Seraphina murmured, brushing a curl from her sister's cheek. "Not when you are so loved." Clara's lips trembled. "Even by you? After everything?" "Yes," Seraphina replied. "Even by me?" A tear slipped down Clara's temple. "I always knew," she confessed. "Even before he said your name more than he said mine. Even before the ball. Even before the proposal." Seraphina's breath caught. "Then why—" "Because I wanted to matter," Clara said, her voice cracking. "Just once, I wanted to be seen, to be chosen. Not as the younger sister or the prettier girl, but as someone worth loving." Seraphina closed her eyes. "I never meant to take what was never mine," Clara continued. "But I thought, if I was perfect enough, if I smiled enough, if I became what everyone wanted, maybe he would forget you." Seraphina leaned forward, cradling her sister's face between her hands. "I would give up every smile I ever had," she whispered, "if it would bring you back to yourself." Clara wept then, not the polite tears of society, but the aching sobs of a girl who had lost herself in the mirror of others. They clung to one another for a long time. And when the fire dimmed further, Seraphina pulled the blankets around Clara's shoulders and promised she would not leave again. Downstairs, a knock echoed through the house. Lady Agnes answered it. It was Edmund. He looked tired, pale, determined. "I've come to see Seraphina," he said. "No," Lady Agnes answered, her voice cold as marble. "She is not available to you. She is not your prisoner." "No," she said again, "but she is still my daughter, and I will not allow you to break what little remains unbroken." He stared at her, jaw clenched. "Then give her this." He handed her a sealed letter. The wax bore his family's crest, though the lines were slightly smudged, as if his hands had trembled in sealing it. Lady Agnes accepted it with a curt nod and closed the door in his face. Hours later, Seraphina sat beside Clara, who had finally fallen into a fitful sleep. The room was warm now, quiet, full of the breath of healing things. She found the letter on the side table outside her chamber, placed carefully and without note. She recognized his handwriting at once. Her fingers hovered over the seal. She hesitated. Then, without sound, she broke it open and read. The fire in the drawing room had been burning since late afternoon. Its golden glow painted long shadows across the polished wood floor, casting warm light against the ivory molding and the burgundy drapes that framed the tall windows. Outside, night had already fallen, veiling Bath in mist and silence. The lamplighter's footsteps echoed faintly in the distance, rhythmic and solemn. Seraphina sat alone near the hearth, her hands resting motionless on her lap. The sealed letter lay before her on the side table, untouched, since Lady Agnes had placed it there without a word. She had recognized Edmund's handwriting instantly, elegant, familiar, edged with restraint and trembling with urgency. She had not opened it earlier. Not in Clara's room, where her sister had clung to sleep like a drowning woman clutching at reeds. Not in the solitude of her chamber, where memories hovered too near. Only now, in this room where her childhood had once played out between lessons and lullabies, did she feel ready to face it. The wax had been smeared slightly in one corner, as though his fingers had trembled in sealing it. A detail so small, yet so achingly human. She reached for the letter and broke the seal with care, unfolding the parchment slowly, as though it might shatter in her hands. The fire cracked softly behind her. My dearest Serafina, I have written and rewritten this letter so many times, only to find that the truth has always been the same. I failed you, not out of cruelty, not even out of indifference, but out of fear. You once asked me what I wanted. I did not answer then, not with words, nor action. And yet, every moment since, my silence has followed me like a shadow I cannot outrun. I wanted you, not because you were graceful or composed, not because you met society's expectations. I wanted you because when you looked at me, you saw not the Marquis, nor the heir, nor the dutiful son. You saw the man. And I, coward that I was, fled from that mirror. I let myself be guided by duty, by noise, by the weight of every voice, but my own. And now I stand beneath the ruin of what I built, longing for the thing I once cast aside, you. If I never again see you, let these words be the last truth I offer. You were not passed over. You were not forgotten. You were not unloved. You were simply more than I believed I deserved, and now I fear I shall live knowing I was right. Edmund. The letter trembled slightly in her hands as she finished it, not because of the cold, but because every word had found its mark with the precision of a blade honed by regret. The firelight danced across her face, reflecting in the wet shimmer of her eyes. She folded the letter once more, slowly, pressing the crease as if sealing something inside her heart. She did not cry. Tears would have been too easy, too indulgent. Instead, she sat still for several minutes, her thoughts suspended in the space between memory and silence. A creak on the floorboards made her turn slightly. Sir Henry stood in the doorway, a glass of brandy in one hand, his dressing robe drawn close around his frame. He looked older than she remembered, his once imposing posture now gently stooped, his eyes shaded not with sleep, but with something softer, watchfulness. He entered the room quietly and stood near the opposite side of the hearth. "I saw the seal," he said simply. "I knew you would wait until it felt safe." Serafina said nothing. She didn't need to. Sir Henry took a slow sip of his brandy, then lowered the glass. "I have made many mistakes, Serafina," he began, his voice deep and lined with age. "Some I've confessed, others I've simply learned to live with." She turned her gaze toward him, silent. "When I was your age, I married your mother because it was expected, because it secured land and influence, because it made sense. And for years I convinced myself that sense was enough." Serafina watched the fire, her eyes flickering with its light. "But it isn't," he continued, "and it never was." He sat down beside her, not too close, but near enough that his presence felt steady. "I see in you the same conflict I once lived with. The temptation to choose what is safe, what is respectable, what won't cause scandal. But I see something else too. I see the strength to choose something greater." She looked at him now, her father, whom she had always known but never truly seen. A man carved from silence, suddenly speaking the truth like a confession at a dying hour. "Pride," he said, "is armor, but love is courage." The words settled between them like snow on stone, and for the first time, Serafina felt something shift inside her, not the collapse of restraint, but the quiet bloom of possibility. She stood. He did not stop her. She moved with calm purpose to the hallway, where she retrieved her cloak, the dark blue one lined with velvet. She tied it at her neck, slipped on her gloves and walked toward the door. Outside, the night had grown colder. The mist clung to the lamplight, and the streets were hushed, save for the distant hooves of a carriage and the whisper of wind along the pavement. Serafina stepped into the dark. The letter remained pressed against her chest, tucked into the lining of her cloak, its weight both a wound and a balm. She walked along the royal crescent, past the grand houses and the wrought iron gates, past the ghost of the girl she had once been, the one who believed silence could protect the heart. Gas lamps flickered above her, their flames dancing in the fog, casting long, wavering shadows upon the cobblestones, and still she walked, not with hesitation, not with fear, but with the kind of resolve that does not come from certainty, but from the knowledge that the heart cannot remain silent forever. She did not know what would await her tomorrow, but tonight, wrapped in darkness and firelight and the memory of a man who had finally spoken the truth, Serafina Trevelyan chose not what was safe. She chose what was true, and disappeared into the mist. The Roman baths had long since been abandoned to the quiet stillness of night. The last of the day's visitors had gone, leaving only the gentle murmur of the ancient waters, still warm and ever steaming under the moonlit sky. Pale mist curled in the air, rising above the columns and statues, cloaking everything in a dreamlike hush. The scent of moss and mineral lingered, earthy and timeless, like a secret whispered through the centuries. Serafina stepped through the arched entrance with slow, careful steps. Her boots echoed softly against the wet stone, each footfall deliberate, her breath steady, though her heart beat with a rhythm she could not tame. She had not planned to come here. The letter had not named a place, but her heart had guided her feet, and brought her to the only place that had ever felt sacred between them. As children, they had wandered here beneath governess's distracted eyes, chasing shadows and stories through the steam. As young adults, they'd returned for concerts and civic ceremonies, always with others, always guarded. And now, as two people stripped of pretense and pride, they met once more, no longer sheltered by society's gaze, but exposed in the vulnerability of truth. Edmund stood at the edge of the water, his coat unbuttoned, his shoulders tense. He turned before she spoke, as if he had known she was there all along. His expression was not one of triumph. It held no hope of victory, only the aching stillness of a man who had nothing left to lose but the truth itself. Serafina stopped a few steps away, her cloak drawn tightly around her. The silence between them felt immense, yet strangely tender, like the hush that comes before the first notes of a sonata. "I didn't ask you to come," he said quietly. "I know. And yet, here you are." "Yes." He looked away, down into the water, watching the surface ripple with the soft current, as if searching for the words beneath. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said after a long pause. "I cannot ask for what I squandered." Serafina's eyes did not leave him. "Then what are you asking for?" He inhaled, but it was not the kind of breath that steadies a man. It was the breath of someone who knows he must speak what he has always feared. "I should have chosen you," he said, voice low but unwavering. "Not just for love, not just because my heart was yours from the beginning, but for honor. Because choosing you would have been the only honest thing I'd ever done." The words floated between them, fragile and raw. Edmund dropped to one knee, not in ceremony, not in performance. There was no ring, no witnesses, no expectation of acceptance. Just him, a man stripped of title and tradition, asking not for possession, but for truth. His eyes lifted to meet hers. "Do you still love me?" Serafina's lips parted slightly, her breath catching on the edge of something unspoken. She did not answer at once. The question deserved more than impulse. It demanded honesty, not the kind wrapped in hope, but the kind born of fire and survival. "I never stopped," she said at last. "But love without courage is nothing but pain, and I have carried enough pain for both of us." His jaw tensed, his shoulders rigid. "Then let me carry the rest." Her hand reached out, trembling, not with hesitation, but with the weight of choice. She took his hand, gently lifting him to his feet. "Then choose me now," she whispered, "not with guilt, not with apologies, with your whole heart." Edmund's breath shuddered out of him like a storm, breaking into calm. He leaned in, slowly, reverently, until their foreheads touched. And when he kissed her, it was not the kind of kiss that claimed or demanded. It was a kiss of remembrance, of reverence, of a vow spoken not in words, but in the hush of two souls finally meeting at the same rhythm. Steam rose around them, cocooning them in warmth and silence. Somewhere in the distance, the city of Bath slept, unaware that something sacred had been restored, not in a cathedral, but in a pool of ancient water, under the quiet witness of stone and time. Across the city, in a modest house near the assembly rooms, Clara folded the last of her dresses into her trunk. Her fingers lingered on a piece of sheet music, unfinished, scribbled in haste. She held it to her chest, eyes closed, and allowed herself a single tear. Tomorrow she would leave for Paris, not in exile, but in search of something that had once felt distant, herself. In Oxford, Julian sat alone in his study. The fire had gone low, and his latest book lay forgotten on the side table. He poured himself a small glass of sherry, smiled faintly, and raised it not in bitterness, but in quiet salute. To the woman who had once stirred his heart, and to the truth that love, when unreturned, could still leave behind something honorable. Lady Helena, ever the architect of appearances, packed her trunks in silence. The scandal had undone her carefully woven web. Investors had withdrawn. Her name, once synonymous with power, was now spoken with caution. She would leave Bath under the cover of morning fog, no farewells, no explanations. Just the faint scent of rosewater trailing behind her in the corridors of houses she would never re-enter. Months passed. The seasons turned. The bells of Bath rang one quiet morning. Not for spectacle, not for society, but for something rarer. A wedding without audience. Seraphina stood before the chapel in a gown of simple cream silk, her hair adorned with a single pin made of mother-of-pearl. There were no diamonds, no trumpets, only the scent of spring lilacs wafting through the open doors. Edmund waited at the altar, his suit plain, his eyes full. No guests filled the pews. Only Sir Henry and Lady Agnes, sitting in still dignity, their hands quietly joined. Clara was in Paris, but had sent a note written in her delicate hand. "You once gave me your silence when I needed it most. I now return it to you as a blessing. Be happy, Seraphina, I will find my music." As the priest spoke the vows, no one wept. The tears had long been shed. What remained was something quieter, deeper, a peace earned not through perfection, but through perseverance. And when Edmund lifted Seraphina's veil and kissed her, it was the kind of kiss that did not ask for applause. It simply was, because love that endures betrayal, silence and sacrifice does not need to be witnessed to be real. It only needs to be chosen, once and again and forever. And in the quiet shadows of that small chapel, with the sun breaking gently through the stained glass, Seraphina Trevelyan became not a bride of convenience, nor a woman saved by society, but a wife chosen in truth. A woman loved not because the world demanded it, but because the heart finally dared. The summer of 1858 arrived with golden skies over Somerset, and the city of Bath stirred beneath the warmth of July. The Roman baths still breathed their quiet steam. The assembly rooms echoed with the laughter of debutantes who had never known Seraphina Trevelyan by any name other than Lady Ashcombe, and the royal crescent stood proud, unchanged in stone, if not in memory. At Ashcombe Manor the gardens had grown wilder, not unkempt, never that, but freer, more alive. Rose vines curled along trellises without rigid trimming. Sunflowers leaned toward the morning, and beneath the shade of a weeping willow, two children giggled as they chased butterflies through the grass. A boy of 6, dark-haired, solemn-eyed, clutched a wooden sword, declaring himself protector of the garden. His younger sister, a fair girl of 4 with curls the color of honey, twirled in a blue muslin frock, laughing with the abandon of someone who knew only joy. Their mother watched them from the veranda, a soft smile resting on her lips. Seraphina's hair was now touched by the faintest streak of silver near her temples, but her eyes had only grown more luminous with time. Her grace was no longer the polished performance of society, but the ease of a woman who had long since shed the burden of appearances. She wore no jewels, save for a simple pendant around her neck, an opal set in gold, gifted to her by Edmund the year their daughter was born. It held no title, no crest, only memory. "Arthur," she called gently, "mind the edge of the pond, sweetheart." The boy turned and saluted her, just as his father did on mornings before business at the estate. From within the drawing room, the low hum of piano music drifted into the garden. Clara's playing. She had returned from Paris 4 years ago, having completed her studies at the Conservatoire. Her talent had matured into something exquisite, but she had chosen a quieter life as the head of Bath's newly founded School of Music for Girls. She never married. She lived in a cottage on the Ashcombe grounds, where the sound of her instrument wove through the air like a second heartbeat in the home. Serafina often said that Clara had found her freedom not through love, but through melody, and perhaps, in a world where expectations had once bound them so tightly, that was a kind of love, too. Edmund appeared at the veranda doors, his hair now peppered with grey at the temples. His gait had softened, but the way his eyes found Serafina had not changed in 7 years. He stood behind her chair and placed a hand on her shoulder, wordless, warm. "They've your stubbornness," she murmured. "And your courage," he replied. They watched the children in silence, letting the moment stretch. There had been trials, of course. The first year of marriage brought its share of shadows, whispers from old families who could not forget the scandal, the tension of rebuilding a name without the favour of Lady Helena's connections. But they had weathered it, together. Lady Helena, after her departure, never returned to Bath. Rumours swirled of financial ruin, of a failed match in Sussex, of exile in a remote corner of Wales. Some said she wandered the continent, bitter and alone. Others claimed she found solace in a convent in France. Serafina never inquired. Some chapters, once closed, must remain so. Julian Fairfax became a scholar of some renown at Oxford, eventually publishing a book of essays on the moral codes of the gentry, a veiled reflection, perhaps, of the world he once knew too intimately. He visited rarely, but when he did, he brought stories, books for the children, and a quiet smile for Serafina that held only friendship, no longer longing. Sir Henry passed peacefully 3 winters ago. On his final evening, he had asked Serafina to read aloud from Marcus Aurelius, his favorite philosopher. At the line, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one," he had smiled, closed his eyes, and gone. Lady Agnes remained, her pride softened by age and by the grace she had seen flourish in her daughters. She no longer spoke of alliances or appearances, only of memories and the warmth of the sunroom, where she spent most mornings with a shawl over her knees and a child on her lap. Bath had changed, or perhaps Serafina had. What once seemed a cage of glittering walls now felt like a city of quiet possibilities. Girls from humble families were now admitted to the School of Music. The poorhouse received better funding after Edmund petitioned Parliament, and on Sundays, the Ashcombes walked to service as a family, not in procession, but hand in hand. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the grass, Serafina rose from her chair and stepped down into the garden. Edmund followed. Their children ran to her, Arthur, solemn and watchful, Evangeline, wild and radiant. She knelt to embrace them both, the warmth of their small bodies anchoring her to everything she had once feared she would lose. Edmund offered her his arm as they walked back toward the manor, the children skipping ahead. Behind them, the sun flared gold against the Roman stone, and the wind carried with it the scent of roses and lavender and thyme. Their love had not faded. It had not broken. It had not bowed beneath the weight of duty, betrayal, or regret. It had endured, quietly, patiently, triumphantly, and as the doors of Ashcombe Manor closed behind them, the world outside sighed with the knowledge that not every love must begin in perfection, only in truth. What a journey, dear listener. If you've come this far, your heart has walked beside Serafina Trevelyan through every heartbreak, every glance that said too much, and every silence that carried more weight than words ever could. This was not just a story of love. It was a story of courage, of choosing truth over comfort, of daring to stand tall even when the world tried to diminish you. Because sometimes the most powerful vow is not spoken at an altar. It's whispered in the stillness between two hearts who refuse to give up on one another. From the elegance of Bath's ballrooms to the hush of the Roman baths, this tale reminds us that love is not perfect. It is earned. It endures through pain, silence, and time. And in the end, it blooms not where others can see, but where we allow ourselves to be seen. If this story stirred something in you, if you too believe that love should be chosen, not arranged, leave us a comment with the word truth. It lets us know you walked every step of this emotional path with us, and it helps us reach others who are searching for stories that speak to the soul. And if you feel moved to support the team that brings these timeless romances to life, you can send a super thanks here on YouTube in any amount you feel called to give. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps us continue weaving these emotional journeys for you. But if you cannot support us financially, know this: your presence matters deeply. Sharing this story with someone who still believes in love is a beautiful way to help our channel grow. You can also explore other unforgettable period romances we've left in the cards above. We think you'll fall in love all over again. Thank you for listening, for feeling, and for believing in the power of love that endures. Until our next story, stay true, stay tender, and never stop hoping.